The prodigal son returns. Love that. The Chris Johnston Show featuring Cobourg's very own Chris Johnston alongside me. We're going to be at Boston Pizza Cobourg on 1111 Elgin Street West on January 17th for a live podcast recording. I am super excited for this. I'm over the moon.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool. I mean, a Friday night. What else are you doing? You're going to Boston Pizza. They've recently completed a renovation. It was already the place to go anyway if you want to watch a game, dine with your family. It's the spot. And on Friday, January 17th, you can see Steve Dangle, Adam Wilde, Julian McKenzie, Chris Johnston, and a whole host of other characters. We're going to have a meet and greet. We're going to have some banter, tell some stories. I bet Cobourg Papa will make an appearance too.
I can't wait to meet Cobourg Papa for the first time. Doors will open at 5. The podcast will start at 6, and then we'll be able to meet you guys after that episode has been recorded. It's an exclusive ticketed event with limited capacity. First come, first serve for tickets and tables, which we will be filling to capacity. Secure your ticket now. Event is sold based on seat, not table. Therefore, you may be required to sit with other groups, but still, you can make friends with everyone there. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be great. Get your tickets now for the live CJ show in Cobourg, January 17th.
Let's go Cougars.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Counting down the days until Friday, the live show at Boston Pizza Cobourg in Cobourg, featuring myself and the Chris Johnston. I'm excited. I've been excited for days, weeks. CJ, you must be over the moon.
Yeah, I'm getting to the nervous stage. You know how there's like the phases
nervous for what?
Of everything. I don't know. Anxious, nervous. You want it to go well. You start to think about the things that might not go well.
No. When you start thinking of things that don't go well,
don't
you
worry.
lose. I know, yeah, sure, but just like at the end of the day, like it's two hockey people, two sports people, two fun people who want to have fun. I'm not worried about it at all.
It's not your hometown, man.
I mean, I get that. That's true.
It changes the stakes.
It's very true. I don't have that. You like that there is that added pressure on you.
Well, and it's January. Like it's snowy outside. I don't know. Maybe people aren't going to want to come.
But I think people will. I think people are planning that. And you can get your tickets if we should still have the link up to get there, meet us, greet us, all that. Like I think there's people who want to be there at this show. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I did hear from a few people, a few folks that even were at our show last year at All-Star Weekend in Toronto. And the SDP show broadly, so that are coming. So I appreciate that. But yeah, no, I'm excited. It's going to be fun. It's coming on us soon here. That's the biggest thing. I can't believe how quickly January 17th came, man. You better be cracking on whatever New Year's resolutions you had because 2025 is already whipping by, brother.
I was about to say, man, I started writing down like a list of stuff I wanted to do this week, just as like a kind of little mini goal thing for myself. And yeah, I want a little bit more discipline on that front for 2025. While I have you here, this sounds like a weird question to ask on air. What are you planning on wearing? Are you going to wear your SDPN jersey?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Although I can be talked into it. I haven't fully determined that. I actually had that discussion last night, but I don't know what I don't know. We didn't get like is it business attire or is it, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what
we wore suits last year for the live show.
I'm not wearing a suit.
I'm not wearing a suit. Like we had to because we were covering the All-Star game at the same time, but like I'm not wearing a suit this year. I just want that confirmed.
I will have jeans on and some kind of shirt. But there will be nothing denoting a suit. I mean, let's face it. In Cobourg, you're only wearing a suit if you're going to a funeral or maybe if you go to church or something like that. But not a lot of suits in Cobourg. Not a suit and tie kind of town at the best of times. So,
what's beyond the Boston Pizza Cobourg? Say like we all from the SDPN show up with like hours to spare. I don't know what time everyone's going to show up, and you had to show us to the coolest spot possible in Cobourg. Where are you taking us?
I hope you know how small Cobourg is, first of all.
I'm aware. Okay. I'm very aware.
Like we could literally, other than it might be cold, we could like literally walk the entire town in 2 hours or whatever. Now
I'm aware, but it's still your home city. Like if
you're probably taking people to the beach. Now, January is not great beach weather, but I would say the beach is one of the main selling points of the town. Mm-hmm. Probably a little stroll downtown. Got kind of like very old school sort of feel. A lot of mom and pop shops in the downtown stretch. Victoria Hall is the big town hall, which is quite grand for that town the size of Cobourg, which I've always been told, but I don't even know if this is fact checked, is because Cobourg was once vying to be the capital of Ontario. So they built this big town hall right near the waterfront back in the day. So probably take it. And then, of course, we'll stop by Cobourg Papa's house and say hello to him. But I don't mean it in a bad way. There's not a lot of highlights, right? It's a pretty honest community. Maybe drive you by the Wendy's where I worked if you're hungry.
Oh, my God. Yes. Yes.
I mean, I'm not going in with you. I haven't been back in since I worked there.
But, we don't have to go in. I just want to see it.
Again, it will not take long to see it. You can see the Wendy's and arrive at Boston Pizza in the same minute as long as you got a good luck with the traffic lights. So
now I'm really excited. For those, again, who haven't bought tickets yet, I'm sure we should have the link if you're watching on YouTube somewhere in our bio, somewhere in the bio of the YouTube video. Doors open at 5 on Friday. The podcast show starts at 6, and we're going to meet everybody at 7 o'clock once our podcast recording is up. Boston Pizza Cobourg.
Can I tell you a funny thing?
Yes.
When we were recording the ads for this, I was laughing when you were putting the address in because I'm like, you don't need an address. Like you just tell people it's at the Boston Pizza in Cobourg and everyone will know where it is that needs to know where it is.
See, like I'm a literal person. So like I see it there. And
like Cobourg's not a town where you need a GPS, man. You just tell people like everyone knows where everything is. Like
what is Cobourg? What is this, like Trinidad? Like it's just like, oh duh, like there's no addresses there. It's like is my Tanti's house with the pink house over there? Like that's how you guys give out directions in Cobourg?
Basically, like I was surprised it had an address. Like I didn't even think it needed an address. Like in fact, you gave that address. You were like 11118. Like,
yeah, I kept reading it wrong. I kept 111.
It sounded like a fake address. Whatever you gave out, like.
Sound like some binary code I was reading. I don't know why I kept saying 111 instead of 1111. I don't know why the read kept going that way. But yes, Boston Pizza Cobourg. If you need the address, 1111 Elgin Street West.
You don't. I'm telling you, you don't need the address.
Don't put it in. Oh man!
And if you get lost, literally just pull over and ask anybody in town. Just stop anywhere and just say, "Hey, where's the Boston Pizza?" And they'll be like, "Turn right. There it is."
Come on, there's like a giant Boston Pizza sign, I'm sure. Just like look up.
Yes. Anyway, it's gonna be fun, buddy. I'm glad the week's here. I hope you get a couple good days of work in and then make the trek down to the Berg.
I'm looking forward to that drive. It would be a lot longer for me than for you guys because it's like, what, 2 hours from Toronto?
Not even. I mean...
Yeah, less.
Traffic's usually a factor, but you could do it in an hour 15, an hour 20, depending on traffic. Yeah, You're probably 3 hours from Ottawa, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it'll be a 3 hour trek for me, but we'll make it work. Get your tickets in, and we'll see you guys all on Friday. Anyway, Siege, we had a nice little midpoint quiz for you last week, for lack of a better word. Since we're still kind of in that part of the NHL season, I was wondering if we could bring back the worry meter and just check in on a couple different teams that you think are worth checking on at the midpoint of their seasons. What's a team? Give me a team that you might be worried about the most as they reach the halfway point of their season.
Well, we could start at the bottom of the standings, would probably be an easy place in Chicago, but I'm going to actually skip by them. I mean, I certainly, and we can go back to Chicago. I have some worry for them, of course, but I tell you, the worry meter is pretty high for me with the Seattle Kraken.
Interesting.
And, I'll tell you why. This is their fourth season now, right? And, missed the playoffs as an expansion team, made it to the second round in year 2, missed the playoffs last year. they're actually at this moment in time, and it is admittedly a moment in time, but they are on pace for their worst season by point percentage of any of those 4 years. And as much as I think that nobody expected anyone to replicate Vegas's expansion experience, it wasn't like you were supposed to be, immediately challenging for a Stanley Cup in Seattle. I do think by year 4, if we went back to before that team was hatched, selected in the expansion draft, you'd want to see the trend going in the right direction. And I think there's a huge amount of pressure there on the front office right now. Even some whispers about potential change if things don't turn around in that front office. And so, I just think that they're a team that's meant to be further ahead than they are. And it's hard to, they played some really weird games this week. I don't know if you saw, they went down to Buffalo and then surged past them, on Sunday in Detroit. They were down 4-0 after 8 minutes, 9 minutes. Ended up going down 6-0 that game before 6-2 loss. But it feels like the swings there's a lot of goals going in one net or the other. And too often it's been the Seattle net. And so I would say my worryometer at this stage of the season is probably highest for the Kraken, because I think the stakes are pretty high for the people working there. I mean, it's just got to the point where I think the patience has run a little thin, where they're meant to take a step. And on, as a secondary part of this, we always are looking at the trade items. I mean, they have a lot of players or a few players of note on expiring deals. I mean, they have some big decisions to make. Look, they're starting to bring their own draft picks in. Obviously, Matty Beniers has been part of the team for a couple of years. Shane Wright's been a regular member of the team this year. You're hoping to grow internally, and that obviously takes some time. But I don't know what's next for them, and it might not be a good thing if they don't find a way to start winning some games in the near term.
What do you think of the way that they've been building their team? You did mention Shane Wright and Matty Beniers, but those are two young, talented players that the Kraken would obviously hope to build their team around. But just in terms of the youth that's been brought there, but also some of the contracts they've signed, bringing in guys like Chandler Stevenson or Brandon Montour, what do you think generally of the way that roster is constructed?
Well, Stevenson and Montour are two players I love. I think in isolation, it makes sense to sign those players. Now, the contracts they signed, because it was free agency and they had leverage and they had other options, are probably the kind of contracts. I don't know that they would regret them now. Honestly, I think that they performed well enough in the short term that those aren't a problem. But they're the kind of contracts you could see becoming a problem by the time you get to years 5 and 6 and 7. That's sort of the cost or price of doing business on July 1st, I think. And so I'm not gonna wrap anyone's knuckles too hard there, because I can understand how they got arrived at the point they have those decisions. I mean, it sort of speaks to the broader point I'm trying to make, is it's going to take a long time before you have a team comprised even half of Kraken draft picks, right? I mean, they've only been drafting for 4 years, so it's only generally very high picks that are on your NHL team within that window of being drafted. There's some level of patience has to happen. You have to bring in picks from elsewhere. I mean, this is where Vegas did so well, is because they had that whole core of OG Golden Knights that they, obviously it's whittled away now. But they kept a lot of those guys around for a long time. And you still have the William Karlssons there and a few other guys that are from that era. So it kind of allowed you to bridge it. I mean, actually, when I think of Vegas, what are they known for? They've traded away almost all their picks and prospects. I mean, they've got so few actual born and raised players because of the nature of how they were born, and obviously because of the success they've had. I don't want to compare what Seattle should or shouldn't be doing based on that, because I feel like in a lot of ways that was like a 1 in a million thing, just the way that lined up, the way they basically extorted the league out of all these extra picks and players. I don't think there was a good understanding at that time. It hadn't happened in so long of the expansion process. A lot of teams made deals to protect the guy, and those deals ended up being much worse than if they just had to let that player go in the expansion draft. I think that, I guess that there should be some amount of patience for Seattle. To me, it feels like it's going the wrong way. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of growing whispers, I'd say, about some instability in the front office, and they might look in a new direction. I mean, they're on their second head coach now, right? Dan Bilesma's taken over this year, and it just feels as though the stakes are going up at a time when their team is heading in the wrong direction, And so that's why they have landed at the top of my worry meter trademark.
So the seat for Ron Francis should be hot.
Red hot.
Okay, one more Seattle Kraken question before we move on to the next team.
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel about Seattle's progress as an expansion team if Vegas didn't go through, or if Vegas didn't exist? If Vegas didn't have the success they had, would you still feel the same?
You might view it a little differently. I mean, I still think the premise is still the same though. By year 4, you'd expect positive steps. And look, we could take a slim moment, January 13th, we're saying that, their points percentage is 0.43, whatever it is. I mean, look, they might win 3 games in a row and all of a sudden it's like 500. And, I don't want to say that everything is crap there, but it just feels a little flimsy. That's all. And, you'd like to say in a world where, we're not comparing them to another expansion team. We don't live in that world, right? And they have owners, they have bosses, there's expectations. They've already had a Winter Classic in their city. They want to be part of the mix. And, sometimes you got to take some wrong turns before you go down the right road. And maybe that's what's happening now, or maybe that change has to happen. That's not for me to decide, but I can just tell you, they're at the top of the worry meter. I mean, Chicago probably should be at the top, but that was such an obvious choice. I felt like I had to get a little creative here with our game.
Is Chicago where you'd like to go next?
Yeah. I mean, where do we start? You land Connor Bedard and you're still last in the league. Connor Bedard's just put together a 9-game point streak. It looks like he's starting to take some steps. You've changed the coach already this season. There's a few other places, foreshadowing, that have changed coaches this year and got a nice bounce. Fortunately for the Blackhawks, since firing Luke Richardson, that's not been the case for them. And, I just look at their pool of players and it just feels so far away from being so far away from what you need to contend. This summer, as of July 1st, the Blackhawks are going to be eligible to sign Connor Bedard to a second NHL deal. I have no idea where that's going to land money-wise yet. I think, quite honestly, he's basically had 1.5 seasons in the league. This next half a season will help dictate that, because that next half season will give you more info and it's still significant. But the point is you're going to be paying him a lot more pretty soon. And it's tough. I mean, we can go back. I don't understand why they traded Brandon Hagel. I know this is a weird place to start maybe, but you look at the season Hagel's having in Tampa, basically on a 90-point pace. Him and Anthony Cirelli, I don't know if you saw this stat, since November, they're actually plus on the penalty kill. They have scored more shorthanded goals when they're on the ice over a 2-month period than Tampa's allowed while they were out there killing penalties. Obviously, those are 2 players that are going to represent Canada next month at the Four Nations face-off. And, they traded Hagel away, and granted, they got 2 first-round picks, late first because it's Tampa. But, you just feel like that would be the kind of guy that it would be nice to have alongside another talented young player and a few more. I mean, they've got Nazar up now too. And obviously it's not just the Bedard show in Chicago, Alex Vlasic on their blue line, but it just feels like, I don't know what the plan is. I don't know where it's going. And look, I guess maybe they could hit another number 1 overall pick here. We'll see. And then maybe things look different next year, but feels like there's a lot of work to be done in Chicago, and they're not supposed to be this bad right now. And so it would be hard not to have the worry meter up pretty high for the Blackhawks, because this isn't meant to be a year again where they're in draft lottery position. They were hoping to take a meaningful step that hasn't happened. So
where do you start with? I mean, kind of repeating what you've kind of started with the topic, but is it the veterans around Connor Bedard not working? Just the team constructed not very well. Obviously, you've mentioned Brandon Hagel and some of those other pieces who have been around those teams for the last few years. They're gone.
But that could still be there. That's what I'm saying with Hagel, right? It's so easy. Granted, sitting in front of a microphone and being like, when you're rebuilding, you can't fully rebuild. But the truth, if you get rid of every useful player, which is more or less what Chicago did as an organization, just the path back is so long. I just think it's fraught with peril. And so, I can understand, quite honestly, letting Taves and Kane go when they did. Obviously, they traded Kane to the Rangers at that deadline, and they didn't re-sign Jonathan Taves. Like, I can understand making that hard decision because those players were aging out of what you needed at that time, even though they meant a lot to the organization. But, trading the Alex DeBrincats and, Hagel in particular, Hagel at the time he was traded was making very little money against the cap, was clearly, going to be due for a raise, which he ultimately got in Tampa after the deal there. But, it just felt like they tore it down too much. And then now the build back up is daunting. And frankly, and you're doing it when you're supposed, ideally, when you get these first overall picks, rather, and especially the difference making types, you want your team to be getting good before they're paid a lot of money, right? Because at a certain point, like Connor Bedard's going to make a lot of money in his career beyond this entry level deal, but the entry level system keeps players on cost control contracts for the first 3 years of their NHL career. It feels out of alignment there, and I don't know what they do. I mean, at least last summer you saw them try to address that, but signing Bertuzzi, signing TJ Brody, trading for Mikheyev, these moves haven't really made much difference. So maybe they got the wrong veterans, or maybe it underlines why you don't want to build your team that way. It's hard to get the kind of players you need in that moment. I feel like they haven't done a great job of weaponizing their cap space. Like, I think there's probably more opportunities out there for them to have used their cap space, taking on maybe slightly bloated contracts from other teams that the teams need to get rid of, but you actually have a player there. I don't feel like they've done a good enough job at that, and that's partly led to where they are now. And so what do they do next? I mean, they got to find players. I mean, at a certain point, and I think we're at that point, you're not, I mean, it would be nice to them. If you're this bad already, you might as well win the number 1 overall pick. Don't get me wrong, but that shouldn't be the goal of the organization. The goal of the organization is to be competitive. And you can see it on Connor Bedard's body language too. Like, the losing is taking a toll. He's probably never been on bad teams in his life, I'm going to guess. Not this kind of bad where they're losing, almost 2/3 of the games. So, it's the worry meter probably should be highest in Chicago. As I said, I just was being a little artsy by starting with the Kraken. I wanted to throw a curveball at my partner here.
So if Kyle Davidson said, I need to take a week off, you handle the team for a week, what's the first thing you're doing?
Well, this is why I'm worried. I don't think there's an obvious first move. I mean, look at this trade deadline, they have a few players you might move. Maybe, Taylor Hall's on an expiring deal. You might be able to trade him. Maybe Alec Martinez in a similar spot as a rental. But at this stage, neither of those players are giving you a whole lot. I mean, I think what they need to do is try to find ways to improve the team. So it's not just trading away your rentals. That's kind of the obvious step that I assume the organization will take. I don't know where you start with that. That's a tough process because they've committed to some of these guys, right? They've signed some of the players I'm talking about, right, and nothing's really turned around, and they're having all these closed door meetings, and they've already fired a coach, got embarrassed in the Winter Classic, in a big game for them. I mean, I think it's a huge project, quite honestly. I don't think there isn't a clear step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And I just feel like they might be further behind now than they were a year ago because of some of the guys they brought in and the fact it hasn't made any tangible difference in the lineup. So, thank goodness I'm not taking over for a day, for an hour, for a week, for a month, because I think it's a massive undertaking, and they're going to be judged pretty harshly on the results if it doesn't turn around here. I mean, the second half might be asking too much, but by next season, if they're in last place a year from now, you got the makings of another Buffalo on your hands. I'm not saying it's like quite to that degree because Buffalo's gone through about 3 different starts to its rebuild and still hasn't got back to the playoffs. But I mean, you start to get those vibes that this is just going to be a rebuild in perpetuity.
So Seattle, Chicago, who else is on your list?
I didn't make notes.
You never make notes.
No, but I looked at it. Well, no, but I I know I had at least one more in my mind.
We're half kidding, by the way. CJ
Boston.
definitely makes notes for this. Sorry, wait, did you say
no,
Boston?
I do prep. Oh yeah.
Oh,
I'm worried about Boston, and they've won a couple games now.
mhm.
Or one game, I think, since. But I look at the goal differential. They're in a playoff spot as of this moment, but I don't know. Something feels off in Boston, and maybe it's just time, right? Like maybe they've kind of defied gravity for so long, and really have not. They had the 2 seasons out of the playoffs, shortly after their cup final appearances in 2011 and 2013, drafted the McAvoys and DeBrusk and Pasternak in that window and then immediately shot back up. Maybe they've just been so competitive for so long that a regression was natural. But, I think I still am not convinced this is a playoff team this year. And I might eat those words, obviously, because they got the guys at the top of their roster are still the same guys that have had a lot of success there. But they're pretty high on my worry meter. You've got Brad Marchand's in a contract here, for example. Certainly not suggesting they're going to trade him this season. I think that if I had to put a percentage on that, it would be like no higher than 5%. Like I think it's a long shot, but there's more turnover potentially coming there. Big decisions. I'm worried. You started to hear fans chant "Fire Sweeney" at a recent game. There's a little unrest or a lot of unrest growing, and I just don't think the team's good enough. I don't think the roster's good enough to really be where they've been the last couple of years. I mean, they're only a couple of years removed from the 65 win season, but they've bled some talent. They've gotten a little older in places, and it's a hard league. So they're pretty high on my worryometer for an organization that I don't know if they're going to be able to get in the playoffs. I know it sounds crazy. They're in a playoff spot today, and they've just come through a pretty long losing streak. And maybe if you want to if you're trying to read the vibes, you're probably like, well, they're going to bounce back from that losing streak. But I don't know. I'm not sure. So they're next in my worryometer.
So where in your worry meter for Boston do you include David Pasternak and Brad Marchand? It seems as if they're fine. There was a report that surfaced last week that suggested that they weren't, but both players refuted that vehemently to the media.
Well, that was the best thing I've seen out of Boston in a month. Honestly, I thought the way they handled that was gold. I loved Brad Marchand's interview. I loved him going right at the radio reporter who had put out that story that suggested that Pasternak had refused to play with Marchand and was a problem in the locker room and all this and this and that. I know everyone's got a read on this. Like we had some people, and I'm not going to name names, in our own group chat saying like Marchand is he's working too hard to refuse this. It means it must be true. I mean, look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. My read on it, quite honestly, when he comes out that strongly, I believe him. I just straight up believe him that there isn't an issue. Now, look, a team that's lost as much as the Bruins have lost of late, I think it's natural there'd be some tension. I'm sure it's not all just, meditation circles and high fives and, like a buddy cop movie in their dressing room right now. Like I'm sure that there's some tough moments, but I just feel like those players specifically have been teammates for so long, have ridden the ups and downs. Like if it's the second rift in the NHL, I mean, maybe I'm misreading it. I'd be surprised. Just the way they both addressed it head on within a couple hours of that report coming out. Like Brad Marchand couldn't have been more clear, right? Like he didn't mince words. He didn't like slyly reference it. He went like right at it. And, I just don't think you do that if there's even a whiff of truth there. But that's my read on the situation. What do you think?
Like, I will say that when I saw the report go out, I was like, okay, where is this coming from? Like I don't know if that's necessarily true. I mean, I'm not trying to question that person's sources or journalism or credibility or whatever. It's just, okay, where does that come from? And you're right. The fact that the players went out of their way to refute that nearly immediately, that also had me thinking, okay, like, is this true? Is this not true? Is this is this something they just want to nip the bud off like immediately? Like what's I was trying to figure out in that moment what's right and what's wrong here, without being too close to the situation to really get a feel for what's going on there. Because I mean, hey, look, you can be a team where, as CJ just mentioned, you have a lot of worries, and the guys in that room could get along. I don't know if there's anything tangible between Marchand and Pasternak where I could point at and be like, maybe there is a point. Maybe those two don't get along. I guess beyond the fact that they weren't on the same power play units, but like people get split up all the time. Like Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl play generally. Yeah, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl don't always play with each other.
Here's the lineup on the board. This is your lineup.
That's what it is. Like, you can play separate from your friend. You don't have to be on your friend's line or anything like that. So I'm in the camp that takes that 1,000-foot view, and I'm just observing what's going on, and I don't know. I'm not there. I don't know if they. It seems as if they get along fine. They're teammates. They're friends. I'm okay with believing Brad Marchand. I think that's where I'm at with that story. I just thought it was really wild. It's one thing for people to take the Elias Pettersson approach, where you try to address it, you bring it up again, and then you're visibly annoyed, and then you walk off. It's a whole other thing when you're Brad Marchand, you're telling the reporter to pound sand, and you're saying this guy has no credibility whatsoever.
Where you came from.
Like, that was an intense soundbite, and it's an early candidate for soundbite of the year in 2025.
Yeah, it's my interview of the year. Do you know what I'm worried about that I don't want to forget?
What? Sure.
Nashville. I mean,
yeah, we got to bring up Nashville.
I'd be really missing the boat if I didn't at least. Well, if we're doing a Wario meter and I didn't mention Nashville, I should be removed from my seat here behind the microphone. I don't even think we have to go in on it. It's almost self-explanatory. They're at the bottom. Right near the bottom of the standings in a year where they spent a lot of money in free agency, kind of similar to Seattle in a sense. And I don't know what the path forward is. We've already seen Barry Trotz, their GM, make some trades. I think it's going to be an interesting deadline for him. He doesn't have a lot of pure rentals. You know, Gustav Nyquist would be the most notable. And I think Nyquist, actually, all things being equal, would like to stay there, would prefer to be signing an extension rather than getting a new home before March 7th. You know, there's some veteran players like Luke Shen and Ryan O'Reilly on long-term deals. We've seen both of them be deadline trades in the past. So maybe there'd be some temptation to do that. But, you know, Nashville's another team where if you said, hey, if you're in charge, what's the next step? I don't know what the next step is. And I don't know, you know, this is on pace right now to be the worst Predators season in history.
Sheesh.
I can't remember what year they came around, but it's more than 20 years, I think, of their existence, or maybe this is the 20th season. Anyway, 2 decades of Nashville Predators hockey, and this might be the low point. So the Wario meter is pretty high on Nashville as well.
The off-season champions, and then this. Like their free agency, they looked as if they were, I mean, not looked as if they had splashed the cash. They brought in these veterans. This was the off-season that was going to elevate them as a playoff team, and they're near the bottom of the standings.
Do you think you and I are capable of remembering this for July? Like when we're doing our UFA show and before we go off on summer vacation, are we going to remember that the teams that we wanted to celebrate last year are kind of the teams that hasn't worked out for by and large?
We can make the point to remember that for sure. We absolutely can.
I'm very grateful, by the way. I don't know if you saw this, but producer Donkey Pants
what?
Was able
Donkey Pants.
It's my nickname for the producer.
Oh, that's good. I like Donkey Pants as a
But producer Donkey Pants went back through the archives and found from last July when we were talking about teams, and he found the clip where I basically said that I thought I was in big on the Washington Capitals. So I'm glad it wouldn't have taken the producer.
I'm glad you censored yourself. I'm glad you censored yourself. Didn't call him like ass pants or something.
No. But I mean, he probably had to search through hours of material to find one take I was right about. Whereas if he was trying to find something I was wrong about, he could start any episode right off the top and be like, yeah, that didn't age well. But we did find the clip where I said the Capitals, I like their moves. And so they're a team I have no worry for, right at the top of the NHL standings as we're recording.
Yes. Do you have a Canadian team you're worried about?
There's not much worry to go around in Canada. I mean, Vancouver is probably the obvious answer. Now they had a big win to end their road trip in Toronto on the weekend after crappy travel and a tough week of games. But I think they're probably the team I would spread the most worry for in Canada because they're meant to be a playoff team and they're kind of flirting with it a little bit. And, you know, there's nothing, I've got nothing new to report on the whole Miller Pettersson stuff. I know that's been basically every episode we've hit on that. But I don't know what the next steps are for the Canucks. And so, you know, given where they're at, that's probably the biggest source of worry. I mean, Calgary, I think, is done better than expected. Then you have teams like, you know, or Montreal and Ottawa rather are kind of on the up and up. You know, the Jets are near the top of the Western Conference. The Leafs are going pretty well. The Oilers have been going well. So I don't think there's actually that much worry to go around in Canada. I think all the worry is centered on the left coast, the West Coast, and for a reason. But you know, maybe the Canucks can propel that 3-0 win over the Leafs into a good stretch here because they are getting healthier. Obviously, Pettersson back in the lineup, Miller back. Quinn Hughes had a great game in that one. So even them, I'm spreading worry after, you know, one of their sort of spirited wins of the season too.
So Dangle's one taker, an overreaction. Him yelling "Bumble." I can't say the word unless I'm going to get bleeped. Can I get bleeped? Can Donkey Pants bleep this if I say the word? Bumble.
Can, but he, you know, let's not create work for the man. I'll say this. Fair. I'm not nearly as worried about the Leafs as Dangle is, and that's fine. Look, he's got to react to every game. You have to say something. I mean, he had to sit through that whole game, right? I get why he was not in the best mood that night. I actually watched the full LFR though. I enjoy when he cranks it up for a one taker and just just opens a vein and just lets it all out. So I'm not gonna say he was overreacting, but I think you can always find, like, no team is perfect. I'm not saying the Leafs don't have holes. Their power play is abysmal, which is certainly not nothing given how it's been a factor in some of their recent playoff losses. But I mean, they're still right where you want to be. So, and they've played a third of the season without Austin Matthews in the lineup. Like I think big picture, zoom out, you know, they're without Anthony Stolarz now for 16 games. You know, he had such a great start to the season in net for them. I feel like all things in the stew, all things being equal, you know, I'm reserving judgment. I'm not making predictions, but like the Leafs have had a pretty good 44 games. That's not saying Saturday. I mean, like, yeah, that's a game they should have won and they didn't have a good enough effort, but, I wouldn't want to have to comment on any single team after every game because there's no other way to do that other than ride the roller coaster, right? Like when it's a big spirited win, you say all these things that are positive, and then when it's a particularly tough loss, you think the world's ending. So I think that's where Dangle was on Saturday night.
Before I mention another team,
tough schedule though.
Yes.
Well, they're going to learn about the Leafs. I should mention that Dallas, yes. New Jersey this week. They're in Montreal on Saturday. You know, if you look ahead, the Leafs have a pretty good run of games between now and the Four Nations face-off, just in terms of teams in playoff position or top teams in the league. And so it's an opportunity for them to learn about themselves and us to have a better idea of who they are too.
So before I mention another team that's doing it right, is there any other team you'd like to express concern over?
I'm going to go with no. I mean, obviously there's a couple of obvious ones I could pick, but I think those are the four teams that are highest on CJ's worry meter on this morning of January 13th.
All right. I like that. Let's talk about a team that's doing it right. That's been the hottest team in the National Hockey League right now. Detroit. The Detroit Red Wings. 7-game win streak for them. Todd McClellan, just that new coach bump. It's working for them. Max Boltman did a great job in The Athletic writing about them, by the way. I'll just plug him. But what have been your impressions of the Detroit Red Wings as they fight for a playoff spot?
Well, I mean, had we done this exercise coming out of Christmas, Detroit would have been high on the worry meter, right? They would have been one of those teams probably getting identified for the wrong reasons. I mean, it says something, Julian, that they've won 7 in a row and they're still not in a playoff spot. So that tells you, I mean, first of all, how bunched up the bottom of the Eastern Conference is, but also, you know, how wrong this season had gone for the Red Wings. Now they've got things on the right track under McClellan. You know, I'm still a little hesitant. You know, I think their power play is clicking at roughly 50% since Christmas. You know, he took over from Derek Lalonde on Boxing Day, December 26th, you know, coached the game December 27th against the Leafs with no practice, no preparation. The Leafs won that night, and then Detroit have won their next 7 games with the new head coach. You know, it's not to say, I'm certainly not trying to diminish anything they've accomplished, but it's a 50% power play isn't sustainable. Now, the Red Wings also have the second best power play right now in the league at over 28% overall. So maybe the power play is something, though, that's clearly a weapon for that team and one of the things we put in the positive box. But, you know, this is a good counter argument. Every time you ask me about a struggling team and you're like, should they change the coach? And, you know, what's my stock answer is like, wow, I don't think that this is just a coaching issue. Well, in this case, this is a pretty strong argument for why you do that, especially, you know, when you're where Steve Yzerman is and this team, you know, this is not about moral anything at this point. Like, he wants to see the Red Wings be a playoff team. He wants to see them be competitive. You know, they're past where even their big picks, you know, those guys are on their second deals now. The Moritz Siders and Lucas Raymonds, like those guys are straight up important members of the team at this point. And so, yeah, tip your cap. See what Todd McClellan has been able to accomplish since getting to Detroit. And, you know, they're damn exciting, scoring a lot of goals and getting a lot of that work done on the power play. But, you know, whether it's real or not, I guess I still need to see a little bit more. Whether it's, you know, is just a new coach bump or if there's more there, I think still a TBD for me.
What do you think how do you think that shapes them up ahead of the trade deadline?
Well, you know, I think it pushes them into buyer mode a little more. You know, the Red Wings have been tied to some of the bigger names that may or may not be available. You know, it seems like, you know, Steve Yzerman at least wants to explore, can they get an impact centerman to add to Dylan Larkin, obviously, in their lineup. You know, I think that it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go buy a bunch of rental players, but, you know, if they're in the mix and you've already made the coaching change, I think that it's on management next to try to give you the best chance to get going. I think it removes maybe the opposite question, which hadn't started yet, but, you know, Patrick Kane, you know, signed another 1-year deal in Detroit. You know, in the reality where they're way out of the playoffs, I think there might have been more discussion about trading him. Now he's just happens to be the hottest player in the league, 13 points in 8 games since Todd McClellan took over. You know, so I think that it settles that down where that won't even probably be a discussion point, assuming they can keep up in this race. And so, you know, I would say at this point, I see them trending towards being a modest buyer. I don't think they're going to empty the tanks and trade away a bunch of top picks and, you know, get in necessarily on the Brock Nelsons. Although who knows? Yzerman, the one thing I'll say about Yzerman is he does a lot of work kind of in quiet. And if any, there's about 5 GMs that might make a trade that no one saw coming. He'd be pretty close to the top of that list. Because he's a bit stealth Steve. So, you know, maybe they do something surprising, but right now I would label them trending towards being a modest buyer at the deadline.
Imagine being a general manager in the Eastern Conference. Say you're like in that cluster of teams fighting for a wild card spot and you want to make a move, and a lot of the teams you'd want to make moves with are still in that race. Like I think of Steve Stais, who had his press conference for midseason on Sunday, and he acknowledged it as much with the fact that when he was asked, I think by Bruce Garriock, about if he wanted defensive help, if, you know, just looking into that, he mentioned like, yeah, like there's all these teams kind of jumbled together and they're still in it. Like, think about it. Like we're talking about the Boston Bruins. They're in a wild card spot as of right now. Columbus, the big surprise of everybody, they're there. And then Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal, Pittsburgh, New York, all the New York teams are there. Buffalo a little farther down. But like, there's so many teams in that cluster who are still alive. The Montreal Canadiens were the hottest team. Thinking of another team that's done pretty well for itself. One of the hottest teams in the NHL, beating all these previous Stanley Cup champions. And today they wake up only 2 points out of a playoff spot, and they're behind Ottawa and they're behind Detroit. Like, imagine being a GM of one of those teams in the East.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of clear sellers. I mean, looking at the standings in reverse order, I think Chicago, San Jose, Nashville, I'm pretty comfortable calling them sellers. I think Seattle's going to be a seller. I'm skipping over Buffalo, though. I think Philadelphia will be a seller, which is the next team up. Anaheim, I expect to be a seller. So I've got 6 of the bottom 7 teams right now in the overall standings by point percentage. Next up is the Islanders, TBD. You know, I still think with Palmieri and Brock Nelson, likely sellers, but Lou Lamoriello isn't calling me back to tell me. You know, Pittsburgh's next up. I think Pittsburgh's a seller. And then I'd stop it there. So, you know, that's about the certified teams I think will be sellers. You know, then just going up from there, you got Rangers, you got the Blues, you got Utah. I don't think any of those teams will be true sellers. It doesn't mean, of course, the Rangers have lots of players on the trade board. They might make trades, but I don't think they're selling, quote unquote. Then you got Boston. You know, they might sell Trent Frederick, but I'm not sure they're sellers. You know, Montreal, Detroit. Yeah. Anyway, your point's well made. This is a weird year. I was calling the bottom of the Eastern Conference like a soggy bag. Like it's just like a group of teams that are just kind of like all together. You know, I saw Lindy Ruff, the Sabres coach, make a quote. You know, after a recent game, he's like, "We're on the right track." It's like they're in last place in the conference. But you know, but you can look at it, and they were at that point. I think they were like 6 points out of a wild card. So like you could look at it both ways. But he was finding the optimism while they were sitting last place midway through the season, and I'm like, anyway, it's Gary's parody world now.
I like that, Gary's parody world. It's where we live in. It's the world we live in. Anyway, unless there's anything else we need to add, I think it's time for questions.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you to everybody who sent in questions through Twitter, Blue Sky, Discord. We appreciate y'all every week. Leafs East is going to kick us off. Is the Maple Leafs' biggest need actually a defenseman instead of a center?
No. As much as I can appreciate the focus on this, you know, with Jake McCabe out of the lineup and some of the team's very recent struggles, I still think they need another center to really go head to head with a team in the 7-game playoff series. And for their sake, they're hoping it's multiple teams over multiple playoff series. And so while I will not be surprised if the Leafs end up making some kind of depth addition on the blue line, I think that their most expensive buy, we'll call it, between now and March 7th, in terms of what they have to give up, is going to come on a player who can play center and likely on the third line.
From Liam Rooney. We don't get a lot of these questions often. This is a trade proposal. What do you think about a deal for Drake Batherson and Josh Norris for Elias Pettersson? I don't know if that's enough for Vancouver.
I don't think it's enough either. But I mean, if you're willing to maybe start with those players and add something else on, maybe. But, you know, Vancouver's position is going to be, if they're giving up Pettersson, you got to give up one of your best players, because Pettersson is without question one of Vancouver's best players. So I'm sure Vancouver counters and says, well, what about Tim Stützle or Jake Sanderson or the players that I can be pretty sure that, you know, Ottawa is going to label as non-starters. And that's the real hurdle, in my opinion, to that kind of trade for Pettersson, is that if they're giving up Pettersson, you have to give up one of your best players. But the kind of teams that want to trade for Pettersson don't want to give up their best players because they're trying to get better and trying to win. So I don't think that's quite enough, Julian. You know, if you're doing business with Ottawa here and you're the Canucks, you want to get one of Stützle, Tkachuk, or Sanderson. And my guess is that wouldn't be a long conversation with Steve Stais.
Thank you, Liam Rooney, for that question. Cody Brown wants to know, what is your favorite way to travel? Trains, planes, or automobiles?
Ooh, I like travel in all its forms. I'd say a plane is probably my favorite. I'm unlike most people in that I somehow get more relaxed at an airport I'm not a very high stress traveler, even when things go wrong. Obviously, traveling as much as I have, I've been on tons of flights that get redirected or don't go at all. And I'm very zen, and I just love being in a plane. Also, a benefit of being a shorter man is I fit in pretty well in those plane seats. I've seen like our colleague and friend James Myrtle, 6'3", 6'4" guy. His knees are like up around his chin when he's in one of those things. I just sit comfortable in there. I zone out. I watch some TV. I can get some work done, have a glass of wine. I'd say plane is probably my favorite way to travel.
Definitely. I'm a train guy. I love the idea of just sitting on a train, whether it's like Via or Amtrak, and you're just chilling the whole time. Also, speaking of planes, I know I'm like slightly taller than you, but my shoulders are very broad, and there's nothing I hate more. Probably just sitting in the middle is probably like at the top, but there's probably nothing I hate more than getting an aisle seat and having like stewardesses just like, or just people just walking up the aisle and just constantly bumping me in the shoulder. I understand this is a first world problem we're going through here, but like my frame is just people bump me all the time.
So if you have choice of seat, then are you just going window and just cuddling in and hoping not to get bumped by anybody?
It's window, then aisle, not going anywhere, then middle seat.
I'm an aisle guy.
Yeah.
I prefer the aisle.
Yeah. You don't have the same issues I have. Anyway, Corey Oliver asks, what is the worst weather Chris has ever run in? Freezing rain, terrible headwinds, blizzards. What weather made Chris think I'm going to die out here and people are going to think I was an idiot?
Well, it's probably it's like a form of the winter weather, right? We've actually had a pretty cold stretch here in Toronto lately. Like it's got below the -10s. There has been some snow and slipperiness. That's probably the worst weather. I actually don't mind cold weather running. I think you can dress for it. I find it oddly invigorating and fresh, and maybe, like, if I'm being honest, like part of it is you just feel so hardcore. Like it actually comes with like a mental boost. It's like, even that I'm out here, even if I'm going slow, like most people are looking at me like, look at this psycho. So I kind of like the winter running. What I hate most, I would say, from any type of running though, is big winds. The wind is like, it's more of a mental game than a physical game. I mean, obviously it slows you down if you're running into a gale force wind, but I just find mentally it's harder to stay in it when you feel like you're giving a lot of effort and you're not moving as fast. So wind is my arch enemy, followed closely by extreme heat. I really do not do well in very warm climates. If I'm ever traveling somewhere that's hot, I'd rather run at like 5 a.m. than at 8 in the heat. If you know what I mean. I try to beat the heat when I can. So I don't have like one day that's in my mind. I have had some tough days recently because I've been sick, and also because we've had some real winter weather here, which doesn't always happen. Last winter, as I recall it, was pretty mild in my part of Ontario. But yeah, keep the wind away from me, please.
You sound a lot better, by the way. Like, just hopefully you're actually doing better. I know you've been battling a cold the last little while.
Yes, I am feeling better today. Certainly, even as I compare it to last Monday, I'm almost back to full strength, which is good. I'm doing a half marathon in 2 weeks. So I was hoping to be healthy for that, and I'm trending in the right direction.
That Leafs fan wants to know, who's your all-time Blue Jays starting lineup?
Oh my God, I can't do that.
Yeah, that's intense. That's a little intense. Give me 3 guys you'd want on that team. They could play any position. They could be from any position.
I mean, I have to really, the decision for me boils down to the Blue Jays of my youth, which won 2 World Series and were in the playoffs every year. Like, which of the players do I take from that team? And then do I want to take any of the guys from like the 2015, 2016 teams that got sort of close? Like, am I bringing like, I loved Edwin Encarnacion. I loved when he walked the parrot with the home run. Obviously, Jose Bautista is a great J. I mean, you want Roy Halladay, rest in peace, on that team. Probably the best pitcher in Jays history. I was a big Roberto Alomar fan as a kid. He's the only Blue Jay, I believe, in the Hall of Fame too. So some version of those players. And no one on the current team is on my all-time Jays team yet. But, there'd be room for Vladdy if he signs a long-term extension and actually gets to the playoffs and wins a game with the Blue Jays.
I'm going to get off of Blue Jays now before this turns into a Blue Jays podcast.
No, I'm calm. I'm calm.
You
haven't
are
bought
very
tickets
calm.
for this year, though. My ticket
tickets.
hunger strike continues. No, I'm not going until they get rid of this front office. So,
yeah, this is why I was moving off. Have you ever watched the show Survivor? Are you familiar with the concept?
yes.
The Laughing Churro is asking. They present a scenario. The Steve Dangle podcast is on Survivor. Who gets voted out first? Who wins the most challenges? Who is most likely to flip on their alliance? Does anyone get medically evacuated? Who becomes the sole survivor? Should I ask each question one at a time, and then you just tell me between the three guys on the SDP?
Sure, but how wide? Like, I'm obviously thinking of Steve, Jesse, and Adam, but are we including anyone else from the SDPN in this?
Are we including Mad Dog? Are we including, you might as well have the entire SDPN if we're going to get to that point.
I don't know everyone well enough.
Yeah, that's fair. So we can
I
keep
think
it
voted
the
off
SDP.
first.
Yes.
I think voted off first is Adam Wild.
I believe that. I think he would. I still think if I said when it was whether it's the SDPN house, when I brought it up when we did the live show or any of those situations, Adam Wild, I don't know if he's going to be that dog in those situations. I think he's calling his mom. I think he is. That's what is going to happen. So yeah, well, if we can't do that in that situation.
First. What was the next question?
Who wins the most challenges? Who wins the most challenges?
Jesse.
Okay. Who is most likely to flip?
When I think of the STP, I think like Jesse's the most capable.
Yes. Easily. Who is most likely to flip on their alliance?
Me.
Every man for himself. Does anyone get medically evacuated? If so, why?
Steve.
Yeah, I can see Steve doing
because he gets so wound up, and I could just see him doing something ill-advised when his body's moving faster than his brain, and something bad happens. So,
last one for you: who becomes the sole survivor?
Julian, I'll give that to you, my man.
Really? You got me? Okay.
I was running out of options. I've given almost everything away. So
damn. All right.
But also,
cool.
I'm actually comfortable with the pick, though. I'm comfortable with the pick.
I won't let you down. I won't let you down. I think that's a good way to end it. I think that's a good way to end the Monday edition of the CJ Show. Get your tickets for the live show in Cobourg. If you haven't done so already, we'll be at Boston Pizza Cobourg on Friday. I'm not going to provide the address. You know where to find it. You guys all have pocket computers. Get your tickets in now. We'll be back later this week with a brand new episode, and we'll see you all Friday for our live show. Thanks so much, guys.
COBOURG.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.